I'm just thinking again, I just appreciate the fact that um, I appreciate you sharing your story. You've shared that, when we had a chance to talk a little bit and you had this idea, and said, hey, maybe this would be something we can bring to a larger audience. For you to share that, I think, again, there's tremendous courage in that. And be able to show that kind of, I call it both strength and vulnerability, because I think being vulnerable, which is not a topic that, or a trait that, and I'll pick on the men, out there, at times that is not what we sometimes embrace. But I got to tell you, I use strength and vulnerability together because there absolutely is strength in being vulnerable. Now we grow up and, and I remember that they made songs on, what they call Boys Don't Cry. So, you get hit in the batter's box, you get with a pitch, you get back in there and you just brush that off. But that can also, if we just keep pushing things down and we don't, recognize that there is an issue. And at some point in time, if it gets to the point where it's, that word that you said earlier about being crippled, I mean, and depression can absolutely cripple someone. And that someone may look just like you, may look just like me, or anyone else. It could be any one of us, and it has nothing to do with how strong you are, how smart you are, how many resources you have, how much income that you can bring in. It doesn't discriminate on any of those things. It can happen to all of us. So for you to be able to share your story, I think it's huge. And I think, my hope is that, one of the things I shared with you before we went on today about, I saw, Michael Phelps had come out several years ago and started talking about his story. At the height of his career, when he's winning gold medals at the Olympics, he was struggling with depression to the point where it was almost crippling, where he said, I didn't even want to be myself anymore. So on the outside, the world's like, this guy's like the golden boy. Look at him. He's winning all these medals. He's unbelievable. Look at his physique. I mean, he's unbelievable. I mean, just what he's doing in the pool, and he's setting records. And at the same time, he had no zest or enjoyment of life when that was happening. So it almost parallels what you were saying, like when the Revs were having a great season, you guys are on the air, we're having fun, but at the same time, sometimes you just felt like, oh my gosh, I'm just trying to get to the end of the season so I can just try to help you said like fix it, so I can just help me. And that's a reality. And that doesn't speak to how much commitment you had to what you were doing. It just speaks to, at times, these types of issues, depression, anxiety, can hit the brakes when we don't even want to hit the brakes. It'll do it for us. Yeah. And if we don't reach out, it's a longer haul to get to a better place. And you said something I think was very important. Sometimes, so most adults who experience a mental health issue, so 1 in 4 of us will do that. One in 4 of us, doesn't matter who us all in America, adults will experience a mental health condition in their lifetime. And most of those, there's a significant percentage of those that will actually start during childhood and adolescence. So you talked about being in college and this is happening. You're like, I don't even know what is going on. I just don't, you said I felt like crap. And that's what sometimes we feel like. We feel the physical symptoms of the emotional and psychological kind of things that are going on. And sometimes if we don't have words for it, or I don't know what that is, we just keep going and we try to figure it out and we weather the storm and it gets better. But it, like you said, I wouldn't recommend that being the way that you do it. Just try to let it run its course. And I think the more that we can have these conversations and normalize that sometimes these things happen, and when it starts to interfere with your functioning, your ability to function as a person and what you do every day, that's the time where you need to be able to lean on somebody. And then to have even one person to be kind of the person you can lean on a little bit to say, hey, you're not alone. There are things that are out there, just like Eric did with you when you brought it to leadership, which is, sometimes that's not easy to do. Like you said, there were concerns in what are people going to think? Like, maybe I'm crying wolf. I've been through this again, attention seeking, or I may be weak because I can't handle all of these different thoughts. Those are things that get in the way of us being able to reach out and get support. And thank goodness that you have someone in leadership like Eric that said, we have something here for you. You're not alone, and gave you that. And then that's a twofold thing. Then you have to take it from there and actually make the phone call. And then there's a third step. You actually got to get to the appointment. And now, like you said, virtually, there's many of the counseling is done virtually right now, like we're doing right here on Zoom, because of COVID-19 and eliminating the possibility of community spread. But it can be very effective this way, in terms of being able to provide that support. Particularly, this is the key. If you can form a meaningful connection with another person, and that can be done this way, and it can be done in person. Now, I prefer to be in person because I love being around people. That's where I get my energy. So this has been particularly challenging even for me in these 6 months, where there are certain people, like even my family, my loved ones, I can't even hug, because I'm just trying to make sure I do my part in making sure that people stay safe. So, but to your point, reaching out like you did, not an easy thing to be able to do. And I do have a question for you. Did you ever sense that other people, or maybe you heard from other people, did they ever come to you and say, hey, Daryl, did other people notice maybe at all that there was, maybe Daryl's just not quite right along the way? Because a lot of times when people are struggling, others notice that. Sometimes they notice it before we do, the person that may be struggling. So I don't know if you ever experienced that kind of in your kind of journey at all.
Well, I would have to spend some time thinking about that, but I know for certain that I was afraid that they would. So whether it was, you know, and I would go to lengths to hide it. Like if it was work not getting done, I would make some excuse, or, you know, at home, if I wasn't myself, I know that my wife would notice that I seemed withdrawn or whatever. And one thing I want to point out, you know, some people may hear me talk about this and think, well, he's got everything. Why is he depressed? And that's true. Like I do have everything. I have a wife, 3 kids, multiple occupations that I love. Yeah, I've got a great life, but it can happen to anybody. So, you know, I think I was afraid that people would notice that. I remember one of my close friends here on staff, you know, I kind of snapped toward her one night, and this was before I really realized that I had a problem, and it was over something stupid. And I apologized the next day, and you know, I actually kind of started to hint toward her, you know, about why I may have reacted that way. So some people that I'm close with, you know, friends, coworkers, some of the coaches I work with, like during the winter, we broadcast York College basketball. I had to privately let them know because I was afraid that, you know, that on the bus or whatever, that I didn't seem myself, that I didn't seem like I was into it. And I didn't want them to think that I didn't love being around them the way that I normally do. So I'll have to think about that, Mike. I'm sure there have been times where somebody noticed something and said something, probably my wife wondering why I'm being difficult or didn't take out the trash or something like that. But I think more than anything, and one of the things that really started to give me strength to talk about it was kind of privately, one-on-one, sharing, you know, with people that were close to me, what's going on and why I might seem different, or I'm afraid I seem different, and this is why. And it might have even been by text, because, you know, sometimes early on, like, you know, now I'm at the point where we're hosting this show, but at various points, I couldn't talk about it. I know when I made the first call into the WellSpan offices, I think I was shaking on the phone when I did. You know, just, you know, the anxiety of it. And we'll get into all these symptoms, I'm sure, but anxiety makes you, you know, like I said earlier, there were times I couldn't eat. There's times where, like, you're overcome with these repetitive, almost obsessive compulsive thought cycles, and you can't be productive, and you can't get yourself out of that cycle. And there's a lot of physical effects that I mean, there's just so many symptoms, going through the motions, you know, I mean, you can go on and on. There's tens and tens of them at least. So, but yeah, back to the question, you know, I'm sure that And like, let's say that, maybe I didn't help around the house or do the laundry or something. And let's just say that maybe my wife, Kristen, was like, "What's going on with you?" And she might have at some point,
Yeah, yeah.
probably. And she would have had every right to. But what was going on with me, and what's going on with many people that are struggling with that, like, you're not trying to not be productive. You're not wanting to not contribute or whatever it is. Um, you just really struggle to sometimes you have no motivation,
Yeah.
no zest, which is a word that you said earlier. And it can be things that you love. Michael
Right.
Phelps with swimming, um, me with broadcasting baseball. Like, it's crazy to think that's one of my favorite things to do. It's insane to think that there were times last year and in previous years that there were days I just didn't want to do it, just didn't want
Yeah.
to go through it. But that's what depression and anxiety can do to you.
Yeah, I look at them sometimes, and when I used to work with young kids, we used to talk about just, sometimes the anxiety becomes almost like the bully. It's the anxiety bully that can rob that joy and zest in your life, even at that age. Um, and sometimes we would identify that as just kind of a, what can we do to combat that? What can we do to try to make sure that you take back the power that anxiety is trying to take from you, or depression is trying to take from you? And I agree with you. I think you're spot on with that. You're talking about your own experiences there. It's not that you didn't want to do your best or try to make sure you took care of those kinds of things and made sure you got the trash or whatever that was, or be all in when you were announcing those games and being present there when you're on the bus or wherever that may be. But at times, you had talked about this. If you get to a point where it really significantly interrupts your functioning, and you said it earlier, sometimes it's just getting out of bed in the morning can be difficult, to put your feet on the ground, to then actually stand up and then get moving, to actually eat something. You talked about some of these symptoms, and we can get into some of that, at some point in time, but you're hitting on some of those keys, in terms of appetite changes. Sometimes it goes down, sometimes it goes up. Sleep can be disruptive. Your energy just goes sometimes completely down, and you have no motivation. Concentration's affected, attention, focus. So sometimes, sometimes you may be laser sharp at things, but when you're depressed and anxious, when it starts to really ramp up, all of that's impacted, so it's sometimes we just don't feel well physically. Sometimes we have headaches. Sometimes we have kind of aches and pains. Sometimes just people feel like, gosh, I just feel like I've just been run over. And it's just really hard to put one foot in front of the other.